Thank you, Rachel. Well, that introduction was certainly, what word should I use? The most recent of my introductions. So distinguished guests, donors, QBI faculty and students, and friends and family. It's a great honour to join you tonight. And my title was given to me by the QBI advancement team. They wanted me to reflect on my career. I don't usually like to do that, but I will share with you, firstly, my mantra. I'm going to give you the take-home message right now. It's very short. My friends and colleagues have heard me bang on it with this mantra. It's about how to do good science. And there'll be a small quiz before you go to make sure you remember this. It's from Galileo, the great Italian Renaissance scientist. And Galileo said, this is how you do good science. You measure what is measurable, and make measurable what is not so. So let me feed that back to you. He said, use your telescopes, your microscopes to measure what you can, count things, describe them, discover the secrets of nature. And if you can't measure them, make a tool that lets you see them. That's the secret of how to do science. And that mantra is something that has really inspired me. Galileo made telescopes. He put them up to the moon. He saw the craters. He thought they were lakes. He looked at Saturn. He saw the rings of Saturn. And then he got a bigger and better and stronger telescope. And then he saw the moons rotating around Jupiter. And he thought, oh gosh, Copernicus is right, that the Earth is not in the center of the solar system. The sun is in the center of the solar system, and the Earth rotates around the sun. He got into all types of trouble with the Roman Catholic Church. Summons to Rome, convicted of heresy, kept in home arrest for the remainder of his life. And when he was buried, they put him in the Basilica Santa Croce in Florence in a side chapel because he was in trouble with the Catholic Church. But a few decades later, they realized Galileo was right. He was spot on. Of course, the sun was at the center of the solar system. And they joked about Galileo making the Earth move. It had to move around the sun. But when they dug up his grave and put him in a bigger part of the basilica, in typical Catholic Italian fashion, they chopped off a finger as a relic. And if you go to the Museum Galileo, it's just behind the Uffizi in Florence. I can highly recommend it. The queues aren't that long. You can see his telescopes, those three of them. They are his original telescopes. And you can see his finger. And they put it under glass, and they made the finger point up to indicate his interest in the sun and the stars and the planets. But guess which finger it was? So when our modern eyes, you go there and you see his middle finger going like that to Rome, and Galileo is saying, I was right. But there is a serious note here, because the lesson here for the junior researchers in the audience is question dogma, or tug the prophet's beard, to use a biblical phrase. You have to be strong in your beliefs. You must be a slave to your data. Don't sweep data underneath the rug. You must face it, even if in the face of strong opposition. And you must be revolutionary in your ideas, because that's exactly what Galileo did. I brought a book along with me. I have two props. And this one is by the great Spanish neuroscientist, Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Now, I can't go into the beautiful discoveries he made, because I just wax lyrical for half an hour. But he wrote a book called Advice for a Young Investigator. You can get it free on the internet. You can get a PDF. I give this book to my PhD students when they graduate, and it's full of great advice, how to do science. And this has really inspired me. He noted that most scientific accomplishments result from hard work, not flashes of brilliance. Edison said the same thing. Invention is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Cajal said, the investigator who is not willing to make personal sacrifices, to think for himself or herself, to go ahead, will never be more than a mediocre follower. And he viewed science as a noble art, a noble endeavour, I beg your pardon, not just for personal advancement of the researcher, but for the betterment of humanity. I think that's why we have donors in the room here tonight, because you know your investment is going to improve things for future generations. Now, unfortunately, there are some comments in this book which are very, very politically incorrect. And if I read them out loud, I would be cancelled. there is a chapter in here about how a researcher finds the ideal wife. Of course, all researchers are men. This is 1895 in the Kingdom of Spain, and that is totally wrong and totally inappropriate. But I do want to acknowledge my wife Frances here, because Carl was talking about the need for researchers to make personal sacrifices. It's not just the researchers, it's their partners and their children and their friends and family, and my mother as well. I'll come back to my mother later. So I want to thank my wife, Frances Stark, who I love dearly. And tonight she's wearing some pearls, which we call the PhD pearls. They're Baroque pearls. I bought her because I felt so guilty that she'd done all this work for me. I bought her some pearls, but maybe Hugh McKinney Welch is here tonight. Maybe I should have got that nice necklace that Dame Helen Mirror was wearing for my wife, because we've been married for 38 years now. I want to talk about my origin story. As a medical student, I worked as a nursing orderly at the old Lowson House, which is the psychiatric hospital at RBWH. I did night duty there. Locked wards, people in pyjamas, everyone smoking, including the staff. And then in 1980, I graduated from medicine at the University of Queensland as a doctor, and then a few years later, I started my psychiatry training back at Lowson House and rotated round. And over this time, what really struck me as a trainee psychiatrist was psychiatry was so far behind other fields of medicine. I look at cardiology, respiratory and renal medicine, endocrinology. They seem to know what was going on. Sure, the heart's just a pump and the kidney's just a filter, but why can't we understand the brain like we do those other organs? So I moved into research in 1990, and eventually became the director of the Queensland Centre for Mental Health Research. And I've been there for 30 years, and that job finishes in 2 weeks' time. I'm retiring. I'm very upbeat about this, because it's time for me to get out of the way. There's a great new generation of researchers who are behind me, and they're going to do a great job. One of the most important lessons I learned as a researcher is this. If you want to understand the broken brain, first learn how to build a healthy brain. Seems so simple. So I felt like we really needed to catalyse more basic neuroscience in psychiatry. So when Perry Bartlett, where's Punk? Which table's Punk? In front of when Perry Bartlett and Punky Saar invited our group to join QBI, which had a strong, and still does have a strong focus on discovery science and fundamental neuroscience, it was a red letter day. It was one of the best days of my life. My heart leapt with joy. And that decision to move into QBI was fantastic for our organisation. And I want to thank you, Punk, and Perry, who's not here tonight, for that invitation. It's really been a tectonic change in our group. Now, much of my research has been on schizophrenia. I don't have time to tell you about this disorder, but it affects about 1 in 100 of us, everyday people like you and me, or my kids or your kids. Voices, delusions, poor planning, poor concentration. But why has research on schizophrenia and many mental disorders been so slow? And it's because, going back to Galileo, it's because we don't have the right telescopes or microscopes. We need to make the unmeasurable measurable. And that's what we can't do just now. We don't have the right tools or the most powerful techniques to measure what's happening in the brain, but we're getting there. One of the things that fascinated me, I do a lot of epidemiology, which is the pattern of disease in society. And there's this strange finding that people who are born in winter and spring have a slightly increased risk of going on to get schizophrenia. What's that? Is it their star sign or something? Or Capricorns are more likely? Or what? No, it's not. It's being born in winter and spring. So we did studies in Queensland and in our winters in the middle of the year, and we found that there was a slight excess there. And then we wondered what it could be. And so we thought that vitamin D, which is the sunshine hormone, that goes down in winter and it goes up in summer. So we thought maybe we should put that as a candidate. We're looking for targets. What you do in research is you get a hypothesis and then you try to knock it down. It's like a cricket stumps. You knock those stumps down, reject that hypothesis. So we set that hypothesis up. And I want to acknowledge Tom Byrne, who's here at this table. Give us a wave, Tom. We got our first NHMRC, Medical Research Council, to set up an animal model where we took vitamin D out of rodents. And we stole Tom from Cambridge University. He came over, and his research has just really blossomed over those decades, like a kite in the wind, and we're all very proud of your success, Tom. But Tom and my many colleagues found that if you take vitamin D out of a rat brain, you change the shape of the brain. That was an amazing discovery that we had, and we didn't think that the effect would be so palpable. So we've done a lot of animal experiments over the last 15 years, and we published over 50 papers on the topic, and we probably had 12 to 20 NHMRC grants, Tom. It's just a little bit embarrassing to say it out loud now when grants are so hard to get. And we discovered that vitamin D is really important for dopamine, which is a really important chemical in the brain. So how do we get this back to humans? We've done animal studies, we've got a hypothesis, how can we test it? So you'll know that when a baby is born, they take a little drop of blood from the heel, and they put that blood on a piece of filter paper, and they dry the filter paper out. They put it in the envelope and they send it to a lab to screen for things like cystic fibrosis and rare disorders like phenylketonuria. My colleagues in Denmark have kept those pieces of filter paper, and they have registers. They can link people's filter paper to people who went on to get schizophrenia. So we thought, well, this would be a great technique to measure vitamin D in that filter paper kept in Copenhagen in a freezer. And that's very strictly ethically governed. We never get to see the names. We have to apply for ethics approval. It's de-identified. So my colleagues in Denmark, let's try that, except there was a big problem. We got the piece of filter paper that we got was smaller than a piece of confetti. There's no way we had enough sample to measure vitamin D. So what would Galileo say? He'd say, make a new instrument, make some way of measuring it, make measurable what is not so. So here my colleague Darryl Lyles, he's a great buddy of mine and Tom's. He had done his PhD looking at various assays, and he put his head down for 3 years, back-breaking work, and the University of Queensland had these very expensive machines that go pig, tandem mass spectroscopies. They were about $1 million. They had about 2 or 3 of them. And Darryl got the assay to work. And it is now the most sensitive assay for vitamin D, and it's used all around the world. That was like the animal experiments I told you about before. This was a breakthrough. We could now measure what had previously been unmeasurable. So we got samples from the Danish cohort, blood bank, came to QBI, we measured vitamin D twice in 2 different studies, and we found that low vitamin D at birth was associated with an increased risk of schizophrenia. So we couldn't reject the hypothesis. We're trying to knock it down. No luck so far. One Friday afternoon, I remember it vividly, I was just about to go home. I got an email from Peter Hoy, who was the previous Vice-Chancellor, and it's great to welcome Deborah Terry here tonight, who's our current Vice-Chancellor. For those that don't know, Vice-Chancellors are the big chiefs who run the universities. And Peter Hoy and Deborah Terry are great supporters of QBI. I'm very, very grateful for that support. Peter Hoy is also Danish-born. And he said, John, you go to Denmark all the time. There's these new grants called Niels Bohr professorships. Niels Bohr was a physicist. But they'll let you work in Denmark half-time. And I thought, okay, I'll apply for it. So over Christmas, talking about sacrifices, over Christmas in 2015, you might remember this, honey, I wrote a grant with my colleagues in Denmark. And be careful what you wish for, because I got the grant. Then I had to shuttle back and forth to Denmark on and off for 5 years in the middle of a COVID epidemic. That was hard work. I felt like a FIFO worker going out to the mines and coming back. But the amazing thing was we could do our dream study, and we measured vitamin D in 70,000 samples. That paper was published last month. Some of you might have seen it on the news. So we found some amazing results, and this is one of the reasons I'm happy about retiring, because I've put these results out now, and it's up for the field to follow it up. But we found that low vitamin D was not only linked to increased risk of schizophrenia, but also autism and attention deficit disorder. 3 different ways, we got those clues. So what have we discovered? We believe, here's another take-home message, is that vitamin D in early life is very important to build strong bones. We've found evidence to suggest that it's also important to build healthy brains. And if this theory is correct, I may not be around. I might be in a nursing home by the time they sort it out. But if it's correct, then a safe, cheap, simple vitamin D supplement may be the primary prevention of serious mental disorders. Time will tell. I want to now finish on some personal reflections about the importance of philanthropy. That's the theme of our meeting tonight. I grew up in a family that was very engaged in fundraising. My late father, Brian McGrath, was a district governor of Lions, and he was deeply involved in the Lions Kidney and Medical Research Foundation. And in fact, that foundation gave money to Darryl Isles to develop new ways to measure things, which led indirectly to the vitamin D assay that we had 20 years later. And I'm also very proud that my mother is here tonight, Betty McGrath, the formidable, unstoppable Betty McGrath, 92 years old. Give a round of applause for my mother. Because not only my father was a plumber, I'm a Barden boy, and Mum and Dad supported all of us in education. I'm so grateful for that. But Mum has had a real prominent role in fundraising. Firstly, she was on the Lord Mayor Charitable Trust. Sally Ann's over there at table 9. Hello, Sally Ann. And you were the Lord Mayor, I think, at that time. So it's great to get Sally Ann and my mum together tonight. But also, Mum was on the Martyr Foundation and was responsible for a lot of fundraising there. And in fact, there's a foundation, there's an award named the Betty McGrath Award now. I also want to pay homage to my good friends Gavin Bird and Karen, and they're sitting at this table here. And let me tell you what about these people. Gavin was involved in setting up Schizophrenia Fellowship Queensland, which is a group to support people with schizophrenia and their families. And as well as raising their own family, Gavin and Karen ran a chain of childcare centres, and he ended up buying Archerfield Airport, and he tells me he's still going there 3 days a week, so you need to retire, Gavin. But in 2005, Gavin, you gave me this book. And I think I was giving a talk at the Customs House, and you might have introduced me, and he gave me this book with this wicked grin on his face, and he had an inscription in it, and he said, read it later on, John. I'll read it out tonight. I'll get a bit emotional reading this. This treasure is entrusted to John McGrath in gratitude for his support, with the confidence that he'll use it wisely to encourage scientific understanding and redirect misguided enthusiasm. This is a book about phrenology. Gavin knew this was complete rubbish, and he gave this to me as a talisman or as a reminder about, do better than this, John. So, Gavin, I want to give you a round of applause for that support you gave me. This book has been a great source of inspiration for me, and without the support of donations from the fellowship and also from the QBI Trust, that my research would never have even got on the launch pad, let alone reach escape velocity. Getting a big grant like Niels Bohr, $7 or $8 million, that was fantastic. But getting small grants allowed us to get the techniques working and to start this whole project. It's so important that we need to build capacity, and QBI is really, really good like that. So, Punkish, I wonder what Kahal would say if you and I could take him for a tour of QBI. You know, he would just be like a child in a toy shop, wouldn't he? He would just be amazed. He's such a brilliant guy. And he'd love all the techniques we have now. But I think he would say this. I think he'd say, great work. Well done, QBI. You've come a long way, but keep going. You're only just beginning. And I think that's right. We've got a long way to go. It's not going to be next week or next month or next year. But we roll our sleeves up and we do the necessary hard work, and those discoveries will come. So, dear colleagues, by investing in QBI research, your donations will help change the trajectory of future knowledge and help QBI set traps for future discoveries. Bid up, please. Thank you very much.